Well, hey, there you are, Sonia here. Welcome to Sonia's Sermonettes. Have you ever really given it much thought about what really happened over 100 years ago in California on Azusa Street and that great outpouring of God's Spirit? We hear a lot about how the wonderful things that took place and the miracles and have been documented and recorded down and to history as to what took place and how it all came about and how miraculous of a move of God that the people of all walks of life were experiencing. There was no separation of people from any race, color, nothing was separated. They all come together, get this, with one thing on their mind, and that was to worship the Lord. They had no intent of separating and sending this little group off in this little cluster or this other little group in another little cluster. They were just caught up with such a great outpouring of God's Spirit. There was nothing in their minds that made them to think of something that might be brewing, something that might be undermining what was going to be taking place or what was taking place. God was moving and the people were overwhelmed and thrilled, and many were healed and delivered. But what was taking place was there was a few people that didn't even care how great God was moving. They thought that they should be the ones to have God moving in their lives and not in this little humble group, in this little humble building that they were in. Surely God had a better plan than that, but it's very obvious that God plan was right there with those people and wanted to move right there and had no matter of being prejudiced or partial as to who came in or what walks of life they were from or whatever their beliefs may be. It was just a sweep of God's Spirit. But what happened was this: the spirit of envy and the spirit of jealousy began to take over some people, and they could not stand the fact that God was using humble servants, young people, and the great leader that God sent them was William Seymour, that was a very humble servant and was willing to let the Spirit of God just move into flow. Those people, in my mind, was so caught up with what God was doing, they didn't even think about anyone wanting to hinder such a great move of God. Why would anyone, in any sense of reasoning, actually want to stop and to hinder the move of God? It was not even able to comprehend such a thing, but they were just like innocent because they were so caught up and just filled with the Spirit of God, as many of us need to have today. We need to quit dividing and separating and causing God's Spirit to just be shut down. God won't bless. He will not bless. He said a house divided cannot stand. But I can imagine that one of the saddest days of those dear souls' lives and William Seymour, when they came to the place that they had so hard worked and cleaned and got it ready for people to come in 24 hours a day or whatever, how sad it must have been. Now listen, to have walked up to the door anticipating another great move of God's Spirit, and the doors were locked. What kind of a person or people or spirit did such a thing to shut down the possibilities that someone could be receiving God, healing and deliverance, and even raised from such a trauma state of mind or physical state? What kind of a spirit are we talking about here? Well, it wasn't the Spirit of God. I can tell you that, and anyone with any kind of an insight, just common sense of any sort or any rhyme or reason, would see there was a evil spirit that someone had allowed to just come into them. Now you say, Sonia, didn't the Bible say that Jesus came and destroyed the works of the devil? Yes, it does. But you know what? he was still on the earth and still is. It's quite obvious he's running wild. Last minute thing carrying on and destroying here and destroying there and causing division in every aspect and avenue. Nothing seems to be solid or stable or nothing. And people have allowed that. We need to put a stop to this thing, and we need to realize that God's greater, and the power that God has given you and I and his church and his believers and all walks of life. We have a great power that's been granted us. We've got the power to believe, as great as it was on Azusa Street. It was prophesied that in about 100 years there would be another great move of God's Spirit. Kind of makes you wonder what kind of move God's moving across the land and what's going to transpire of that. But the Bible says that God is no respecter of person, and that's what happened with those people. They couldn't stand the fact that God was using some humble servants that was just kind-hearted, loving souls that had compassion for people and wanted to see the Spirit of God. Evil crept in, and those dear innocent ones was the ones who was shut out of the house of God in the move of Spirit. Like in the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve, do you think they had any kind of inclination of the evil works of Satan? Do you think that they even knew they was living in heaven? It was a beautiful place. They'd never experienced bad feelings, bad works of people, or evil things that was lurking around waiting just to take over. They were not aware of that. They were warned to stay away from the tree, but they didn't have a full concept of what the consequences was going to be. Today, we are without excuse. When we realize that we're causing a division, when we realize that we're separating and causing such chaos and turmoil, we know better, because we have learned from history what that will do. All that will do will be tear down the good works of God. God, you say, well, can't God just go ahead and bless us all anyway? God does not bless a divided house. He wants us to come together in unity, in one mind, in one accord, and give him glory and honor, to let the Spirit of God work in whomever he wants to. It's no respecter of person when God chooses. Oh, but this generations of people for the last several years have just separated and divided and caused more confusion, more harm, more destitution than ever. Now there is a payday coming, and that payday is not going to be an easy one. We cannot profess to love God and to be serving God and cause such division. It cannot work, and it never has, and it never will. If you build a house that's divided, what do you expect? Well, we got this little group we're going to build over here across the street. We're going to cause all kinds of denominations come up out of this revival, and we're all going to have our own little opinions, and we don't care. Did the great move of God's Spirit continue on? Did it keep moving miraculous miracles and healings and divine things that was going on? Did it continue? Well, we've had a few things happen, a few things here. Listen, we need to wake up. That's all I got to say about this whole thing. We need to wake up. And so, until next time.